The forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves under John's boots. He moved carefully, watching the sky above where two suns burned faintly through the mist. His ship had broken down near the edge of this strange alien jungle, and now he searched for water and shelter. The air was heavy, filled with a sweet smell that made him uneasy. Every step felt like he was walking deeper into something unknown, something watching him. He stopped when he heard a faint sound. It was not the cry of an animal, not the rustle of wind. It was softer, trembling, like someone trying not to be heard. He followed the sound, pushing aside wide leaves that glowed faintly with blue light. His pulse quickened. The sound grew clearer. Someone was breathing fast, like they were hurt or afraid. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was just a trick of light. She was crouched near the roots of a massive tree, her skin glowing faintly like pearl under moonlight. She was not human. Her eyes were too large, reflecting light like liquid silver. Her hair, long and dark, hung around her thin shoulders. She looked weak, her body trembling, as if she had been running for a long time. John froze. His training told him to stay back, but something in her eyes made him step closer. She tried to move away, pressing against the tree as if it could swallow her up and hide her. He raised his hand slowly. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." She tilted her head, confused, her breathing sharp and quick. She did not answer. Instead, she pressed her hand to her side, and John noticed a thin cut bleeding softly down her skin. The wound shimmered strangely, glowing faint blue in the shadows. He pulled out a cloth from his belt. "You're hurt," he said gently. He crouched, careful not to move too fast. She watched him with suspicion, her eyes narrowing. For a moment, he thought she might attack, but then her shoulders sagged, as if she no longer had the strength to fight. She let him move closer. John pressed the cloth against her wound. She flinched, a small sound escaping her lips, almost like a song. He felt the vibration travel through the air, soft but heavy with meaning. It didn't sound like human language, but somehow he understood her pain. As he worked, he realized how fragile she looked. Her arms were thin, her bones showing faintly beneath her strange, glowing skin. But at the same time, there was something strong in her presence, like hidden energy waiting to be released. Suddenly, a loud growl broke the silence. John spun around, hand on his blaster. From the thick brush, a dark shape slithered forward. It was a creature unlike anything he had seen before. Half reptile, half insect, with sharp claws that dug into the ground. Its eyes burned with orange fire, fixed directly on them. The alien girl gasped, pulling back against the tree. John stood in front of her without thinking. The creature hissed, its jaws opening wide to show rows of teeth dripping with glowing saliva. John fired. The blast of blue energy cut through the air, striking the creature's chest. It roared, but kept coming, faster now. John fired again, hitting one of its legs. The creature stumbled, smashing into the roots of the tree. The ground shook. The girl suddenly raised her hand. A strange light shimmered from her palm, and the roots of the tree twisted upward like living snakes, wrapping around the creature. It shrieked, thrashing against the grip of the tree, but the roots held tight. John stared in shock. The girl's body glowed brighter, her skin shifting in waves of color, as if her emotions painted across her flesh. The light spread from her wound, flowing through her arms and into the tree. Finally, the creature gave one last roar before collapsing, trapped completely in the roots. The girl dropped her hand, her body trembling with weakness. She leaned back against the tree, gasping for air. John rushed to her side, his heart racing. "You saved us," he said, half amazed, half terrified of what he had just seen. Her eyes met his again. For a moment, there was no fear there, only exhaustion. She whispered something in her own tongue, the sound soft, almost broken. John didn't understand the words, but he felt the meaning. Trust. Just a little, just enough. He tightened the cloth around her wound and helped her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in his arms. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs shook. Without a word, he let her lean against him. The jungle around them was silent again, the mist closing in as if hiding what had just happened. John knew this was only the beginning. Whatever she was, whatever secret she carried, it was bigger than anything he had faced before. And now he was part of it. John guided her carefully through the thick trees until they reached a small clearing where the air was fresh. The girl's breathing had steadied, but her body still trembled with weakness. He set her down near a rock, and for the first time she looked at him without trying to hide. Her eyes were full of questions he could not answer. She pressed her hand against her side, where his cloth held the wound. The glow from her skin dimmed slightly, and he wondered if it was fading because she was healing, or because she was losing strength. He sat near her, his weapon resting on his lap, scanning the shadows for movement. The jungle was too quiet now. No insects, no birds, only the faint hum of the trees glowing above. He thought about asking her name, but before he could, she shifted uncomfortably. Her face twisted in a way he hadn't seen before, as if she was in a different kind of pain. She stood slowly, glancing at him, then turned away. John frowned, unsure. She walked a few steps behind the rock, her movements awkward, almost ashamed. He stayed silent, not wanting to scare her again. Then he heard a strange clink, sharp and metallic, not natural in the forest. He leaned forward, confused. The girl crouched low, her back turned to him, her hands pressed against the ground. Her body shivered as if she struggled with something private. John's eyes caught a sudden sparkle at her feet, tiny shapes falling, shining faintly in the dim light. His breath caught in his throat. They weren't stones, they weren't plants, they were jewels. Perfect, clear gems rolling gently into the dirt. For a second his mind refused to believe it. The jewels shone like starlight, scattered in the soil as if the earth itself had spat out treasure. Then the truth hit him. They weren't from the ground. They were from her. She was producing them, as casually as a human body would release waste. John froze in shock, staring as the girl shifted again, and more jewels tumbled softly down, clinking against each other like coins dropped into a bowl. His mouth went dry. It was the most bizarre, unbelievable thing he had ever seen. He almost spoke, but his voice caught in his throat. The girl stiffened, realizing he had noticed. Her shoulders tightened, and she turned her head slightly, eyes wide with panic. The jewels sparkled at her feet, betraying her secret. For a long, heavy moment, both stood in silence, her ashamed, him stunned. Finally, she moved, her hands scooping at the dirt as if to bury the jewels quickly. Her breathing turned sharp, almost desperate, like she had been caught in the middle of a crime. John stepped forward slowly. "Wait," he whispered, his voice uneven. What is this?" She shook her head, refusing to answer, her hands moving faster, covering the glowing gems with soil. A soft, trembling sound escaped her throat, half sob, half growl. She did not want him to see. She did not want him to know. John crouched beside her, his hand hovering in the air, unsure if he should stop her or help her. One jewel, brighter than the rest, slipped free of the dirt and rolled toward him. He picked it up without thinking. It was warm, almost alive, its surface glowing faintly like captured lightning. He felt the weight of it, heavier than any jewel he had touched before. The girl's eyes snapped to his hand. Fear and anger flashed across her face, her skin shifting colors rapidly, green, blue, then pale white. She whispered something sharp in her tongue, her voice shaking. She reached toward him, not for the jewel, but as if to plead with him to understand. John met her gaze. "You're making these," he said slowly, the words heavy in the air. This is why you were hiding." She closed her eyes, as if his words confirmed her deepest fear. Her body slumped, her hand falling away. She looked smaller now, broken under the weight of her own secret. John stared at the jewel in his palm, the light flickering softly. It was beautiful, priceless. Yet the girl's tears were real, falling silently down her cheeks. In that moment, he understood. This was not a gift. This was a curse. And now, because he had seen it, because he knew the truth, danger was coming for both of them. The girl pulled her knees close to her chest, hiding her face in her arms. The soil where she had tried to bury the jewels still glimmered faintly, betraying what she wished to keep hidden. John sat a short distance away, the glowing stone still heavy in his palm. He wanted to ask again, but the silence between them was so thick it felt like one wrong word would shatter her completely. At last, her voice came, quiet and trembling. "Not treasure," she whispered, her strange accent shaping the words slowly. "Curse." She lifted her head, and her silver eyes reflected the faint glow of the gems. "Hunters smell them, follow always. Family, gone." Her hand moved to the scar at her side, pressing against the wound as if it carried more than pain. It carried memory. She drew in a sharp breath, her skin flickering with faint red streaks, then calming to pale blue. They killed all, mother, father, brothers, all because of this. Her hand swept weakly toward the buried jewels. John clenched his jaw. He wanted to say it wasn't her fault that she didn't deserve this, but the look on her face silenced him. She had carried this truth for too long. He could only listen. She leaned back against the tree, her voice breaking into fragments, half in her language, half in his. We cannot choose. Our bodies make these. Every moon cycle. Hunters wait. They cage us. They cut us open. They keep us alive just enough for more. Her eyes darkened, and her voice grew so faint he had to lean closer. I ran. Only me left. The weight of her words settled heavy in John's chest. He looked down at the jewel in his hand, suddenly sickened by its glow. He imagined traders, kings, warlords killing without hesitation for even one of these stones. And here she was, producing them without choice, trapped by her own body. Her gaze lifted to him suddenly, sharp and frightened. Now you know, she said. Her voice was no longer weak. It carried fear and warning together. You are danger now, too. They will come. They always come. John felt the hairs on his neck rise. The forest around them seemed darker, the silence louder. He remembered the creature that had attacked earlier. Maybe it wasn't the only thing stalking the woods. Maybe worse things were out there, drawn not by blood, but by the scent of these jewels. He closed his hand tightly around the stone and looked at her. She expected him to leave, to walk away and save himself before it was too late. He could see it in her trembling lips, in the way her body leaned back as if bracing for betrayal. But instead of leaving, he slid the jewel into his pocket and pulled the cloth tighter around her wound. Then we better be ready, he said quietly. His voice was steady, though inside his heart pounded like a drum. Her lips parted in surprise. For a moment, her skin glowed faint gold, a shimmer of disbelief and fragile hope. Then she lowered her head, whispering in her language, words he could not understand but felt deep in his bones. The forest gave a sudden groan, as if the trees themselves were warning them. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked. John's hand went to his blaster, eyes scanning the shadows. He didn't need her warning to know she was right. The hunters were already near. The crack of branches grew louder, heavy footsteps pressing against the soil. The girl stiffened, her glowing skin flickering between pale and dark shades as fear rippled through her. John pulled her closer behind the roots of the great tree, his hand gripping the blaster tight. His ears caught faint whispers carried by the wind, voices speaking in a language harsh and sharp. They were close, too close. A faint red glow spread through the mist ahead, like the light of torches or scanners moving slowly through the jungle. John held his breath, steadying his weapon. Then he saw them. Figures tall and armored, their eyes shielded by dark masks, their hands carrying spears tipped with humming energy. Hunters. The girl trembled against him, clutching his arm. Her whisper was barely a breath. They found me. Her voice cracked, filled with old terror. The hunters spread out, scanning the ground, their movements disciplined. One bent down near the soil where the jewels had fallen. He touched the dirt, lifted it to his mask, and inhaled. A growl of satisfaction rumbled through his chest. He pointed forward, and the others tightened formation. John's heart hammered, but he kept still. The girl's nails dug into his sleeve, her body shaking as if every memory of slaughter pressed back into her bones. He wanted to promise her safety, but promises meant nothing if they were caught. One hunter stepped closer, pausing only a few feet from their hiding place. His torchlight swept across the tree roots, barely missing the girl's pale skin. John lifted his blaster slightly, his finger brushing the trigger. If the light moved even a little further, they would be exposed. The hunter stopped. His head tilted, listening. For one long breath, silence ruled the jungle. Then, with sudden violence, he thrust his spear into the ground near the tree, the energy tip sizzling through soil and roots. The girl gasped softly, too soft for human ears, but the hunter turned sharply toward the sound. John reacted instantly. He fired, the blue bolt striking the hunter square in the chest. The figure collapsed with a metallic grunt, armor smoking. The other hunters roared, weapons raised. "Run!" John hissed, grabbing the girl's arm. They bolted through the mist as spears of burning light slashed past them, striking trees and shattering branches. The jungle exploded with noise, the hunters shouting, the ground shaking under their pursuit. The girl stumbled, her legs weak, but John dragged her onward. Roots snagged his boots, thorns tore at his sleeves, but he didn't stop. Behind them, the hunters closed in, their steps relentless. A spear whistled past his ear and struck a trunk ahead, exploding in a flash of sparks. He shielded the girl as fragments rained down, then pulled her toward the left, where the shadows thickened. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but stopping meant death. The girl pressed her glowing hand against his back, whispering something. The trees around them bent slightly, vines uncoiling from branches and dropping into the hunter's path. The men cursed as the jungle itself tangled their legs. John risked a glance back. One hunter was pulled down, vines coiling around his throat. Another slashed free, but the delay gave them precious seconds. They reached a ridge where the ground sloped steeply downward into deeper mist. John didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arm around the girl and leapt. They tumbled through leaves and dirt, crashing against roots before rolling into the hollow below. John groaned, coughing, but he pushed himself up quickly. The girl was beside him, pale and shaken, but alive. Above them, hunter shadows loomed at the ridge, scanning the fog for movement. One voice carried clearly, deep, and cruel. "She is worth more than a kingdom. Find them, alive." The words chilled John's blood. It was no longer just a hunt. It was a command that promised endless pursuit. He looked at the girl, her wide silver eyes reflecting the fear he felt himself. They both knew the truth now. The hunters would never stop. John pressed his back against the damp stone of the hollow, his blaster trembling slightly in his grip. His chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, sweat dripping down his face. The girl crouched beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her skin flickering faint gold and blue as fear fought against exhaustion. The echo of the hunter's command still lingered in his ears. Worth more than a kingdom. He looked at the jewel in his pocket and wished he had never touched it. The girl's eyes shifted toward him, questioning, desperate. She didn't need to speak. He understood what she wanted to ask. Would he leave her? Would he save himself and run? The silence stretched heavy between them. His mind battled with the truth. Every instinct told him to cut his losses, to vanish into the forest before the hunters tightened their net. But his heart refused. He thought about her trembling hands as she buried the jewels, the broken sound in her voice when she said family gone. He remembered her eyes when she looked at him, not with trust, not fully, but with the smallest hope that maybe he was different. The weight of that hope was heavier than the jewel in his pocket. The girl touched his arm lightly, her fingers cold against his skin. "Go," she whispered in broken words. Her eyes lowered, as if saying it was already decided. "They kill you too. Leave." Her voice cracked with guilt, as though freeing him from a chain she hated to see around his neck. John's throat tightened. He wanted to scream that she was wrong, that running wasn't who he was, but instead he forced a breath and shook his head. "No," he said firmly, though his voice trembled with the weight of it. "I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever." Her eyes widened, silver shimmering under the faint light. For a heartbeat, the glow of her skin softened to pale gold, fragile and warm. But the moment was cut short as a distant horn sounded through the jungle. The hunters were calling to each other, tightening their circle. John pulled her gently to her feet. "We'll find another way," he said. "But we do this together." She hesitated, weak and afraid, then finally nodded. Her hand clutched his sleeve as though letting go would mean death. They moved through the hollow and deck, slipping into a narrow tunnel that twisted beneath the roots of ancient trees. The air was cold and damp, the ceiling low enough that John had to crouch. The girl guided him, her hand brushing the walls, as though she knew these hidden paths. But every step pressed heavier on his mind. He could hear the hunters' boots striking the ground above them, moving steadily, hunting like wolves that never tired. They stopped when the tunnel opened into a cavern lit by faint crystals. The light danced across the walls, reflecting off the jewels still buried shallow in the soil. The girl froze, her body stiffening. John followed her gaze and understood. This was a place her kind once hid, maybe even a home, but now it was a grave of memories. Her voice broke softly. "All dead. Because of this." She lifted one trembling hand, pointing at the crystals. Her tears sparkled as they fell. "I am curse." John stepped closer, his jaw set. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the jewel, holding it up so the faint crystal light caught its glow. This isn't the curse, he said, his voice low but steady. The curse is the people who kill for it. The curse is them, not you. The girl stared at him, her breath catching. Her skin rippled faint blue, then softened again, uncertain. She wanted to believe, but years of fear weighed heavy on her. A sudden crash above shattered the moment. Dust rained from the ceiling less. Voices shouted, closer now. John grabbed her hand tightly. He said quickly, "You're not alone anymore. If they want you, they'll have to go through me." She blinked at him, her lips parting as though to protest, but the fire in his eyes silenced her. For the first time, she didn't tell him to go. She didn't ask him to leave. She only held his hand tighter, her skin glowing faint gold again, fragile but bright in the shadows. The hunters were almost upon them, their footsteps echoing through the stone above. John raised his blaster, his jaw tight, ready to fight. He had made his choice. There would be no turning back. The cavern shook as an explosion split the ceiling, shards of stone raining down in a storm of dust and sparks. John pulled the girl against him, shielding her as a gaping hole opened above. Figures dropped one by one, armored hunters landing with the grace of predators. Their weapons glowed with lethal energy, and their masked faces turned toward the two figures trapped in the glow of the crystals. John fired first, his blaster flashing blue bolts into the smoke. One hunter collapsed, sparks flying from shattered armor, but the others advanced without pause. The girl pressed her glowing hands against the soil, whispering broken words. The crystals around them flickered violently, their light pulsing brighter. Suddenly, roots burst from the cavern walls, whipping forward like living whips. They tangled around one hunter, dragging him screaming into the ground. John ducked a spear strike, rolling across the floor and firing upward. His shot pierced another mask, the body collapsing at his feet. But the hunters were too many. He grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her toward the back wall. She stumbled, her legs weak, yet her skin glowed fierce with desperate energy. She pressed both hands against the rock face, and with a thunderous crack, the walls split open, revealing a hidden passage glowing faint blue. They ran, footsteps echoing as the hunters followed. The narrow tunnel twisted sharply, forcing the armored men to slow. John fired over his shoulder, his blasts ricocheting off the walls, forcing the hunters back for precious seconds. The girl's breath came in sharp gasps, her body trembling from the strain of her power. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a massive ruin, an ancient chamber carved with alien symbols that glowed faintly like veins of fire. At its center, a stone arch stood tall, covered in shifting lights. The girl's eyes widened, silver shining with recognition. She whispered a word John didn't understand, her hand lifting toward the arch as if it called to her. Behind them, the hunters surged into the chamber, their leader stepping forward. His mask glowed red, his voice deep and sharp. "She is mine. The jewel maker lives for us." His words were clear in the human tongue, sending a chill through John's spine. The girl shrank back, but John stepped in front of her, blaster aimed steady. "Not while I'm breathing," he growled. The hunters advanced. John fired, dropping two in quick bursts, but the leader deflected a shot with his spear, the energy scattering across the walls. The chamber shook with the clash, roots tearing through stone, blaster fire lighting the air, alien cries echoing. The girl pressed both hands against the arch. Her body glowed brighter, her skin flickering with wild colors as if every emotion burst out at once. The arch responded, symbols lighting one by one until the whole structure hummed like a living heart. A beam of light shot upward, filling the chamber with a deafening roar. The hunters faltered, shielding their eyes. John grabbed the girl, pulling her close as the arch opened, a swirling portal of light and shadow. The leader roared, lunging forward, his spear aimed for John's chest. John twisted, firing point blank. The bolt slammed into the hunter's mask, blasting him backward in sparks. The portal expanded, pulling at everything in the chamber, sucking in dust, broken stone, and bodies. John held the girl tight, their feet lifting off the ground as the energy swallowed them whole. For a heartbeat, the world vanished in blinding light. They landed hard on smooth stone, the echo of their fall ringing through a vast chamber bathed in soft blue light. John gasped, coughing against the pressure in his chest, his arms still wrapped around the girl. She stirred weakly, her skin dimming, the glow nearly gone from exhaustion. Slowly, she opened her silver eyes, and for the first time there was no fear in them, only disbelief. They were standing inside another place, ancient and quiet, a sanctuary hidden far from the jungle above. Massive pillars rose around them, carved with the same glowing symbols as the arch. In the center of the chamber stood a pool of clear water, its surface shimmering with gentle light. The girl's lips parted, trembling with awe. "Safe," she whispered, as though she hardly believed the word. John helped her to the edge of the pool, lowering her carefully. Her reflection wavered in the water, the glow of her skin soft against the surface. She dipped her hands in slowly, and the light spread across the pool, rippling outward until the whole chamber seemed alive. Her wound closed in seconds, the glow sealing her skin as though it had never been cut. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "Home," she breathed. "Lost, but still here." John looked around, uneasy but amazed. For all the danger, this place felt untouched by violence, as if it had waited centuries for her return. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the jewel he had carried through fire and blood. It still glowed faintly, its warmth steady in his palm. He held it out to her. She stared at it, her body trembling, then slowly reached forward. But instead of taking it, she pushed his hand back toward him. "Yours," she said softly. "Not curse. Trust." John froze. The words were simple, broken, but their meaning struck him deeper than anything he had heard before. He closed his hand around the jewel, his throat tight. She had given him something her kind had always been hunted for, something that had destroyed her family. And yet, she chose to give it freely, not as treasure, but as a sign that he was the first who saw her as more than a prize. The chamber trembled faintly, the portal behind them flickering and then collapsing into silence. The hunters would never follow now. They were alone, far from the cruelty of the outside world. The girl leaned against him, her voice faint but steady. "You stayed," she said. Her eyes met his, shining with something fragile and new. "You did not run." John managed a small smile, his exhaustion heavy, but his heart stronger than ever. "I told you," he whispered, his arms steady around her shoulders. "I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever." Her skin glowed faint gold, brighter than before, filling the chamber with warmth. She closed her eyes, resting against him back, no longer trembling. For the first time in her life, she was not a hunted jewel maker. She was simply herself. And for John, holding her in that quiet sanctuary, the greatest treasure was not the jewel in his hand, but the fragile trust in her eyes, worth more than any kingdom in the stars.